The last time we reviewed a case from MSI, it was a huge thing filled with premium features like LCD screens, brushed aluminium and a modular interior. That was the MEG Prospect 700R. This new MSI MPG Gungnir 300R shares some basic DNA of the 700R, like high airflow panels and some modular parts. However, it's smaller and cheaper, so it might appeal to a wider audience, but is it worth the £160 UK asking price? Well, let's take a closer look and find out. So this is the MSI MPG Gungnir 300R Airflow. It's actually been around for a while, this case. I think it launched towards the end of last year, but we are reviewing it for the first time today. It is available to purchase now. You can pick it up in either black or white colour schemes. The white one is slightly more expensive. You can pick up the black one from places like OCUK, Scan and Amazon. That's priced at around £150. The white one is slightly more expensive. That's about £160. The MSI MPG Gungnir 300R Airflow features amazing cooling potential with support for up to 10 fans of varying sizes, dual 360mm radiators plus 80mm of space at the top for push-pull radiator configuration, as well as a switchable PCIe bracket that transforms the rear from 7 horizontal to 4 vertical PCIe slots. 4 120mm ARGB fans come pre-installed, and the included Omni directional graphics card stand can be adjusted in several ways to support different graphics card orientations. So let's take a closer look at the case. We'll start by removing side panels. It's quite easy to remove side panels. The tempered glass panel on this left hand side just has a thumb screw at the top, and then it just clips out of those quick release fittings. You can see it is quite a clear tempered glass panel on this white version. The right hand side panel removes in the same way, so there's just a thumb screw at the top and then it just clips out again on the same quick release fittings. You can see that's just a plain steel side panel. There's no sound dampening material or anything on this, but there is a magnetic perforated metal dust filter at the bottom because there is a mesh vent towards the bottom of that panel. On top there is a dust filter. It is another magnetic perforated steel dust filter. There's no removable panel at the top, so nothing to show you there. The front of the case has kind of an angular design going on with a large mesh panel that just pulls out from the bottom and is easily released. There's no additional dust filter on the front panel. It is ultrafine mesh, so to a certain extent that should filter dust coming in the system. There's also an MSI Dragon logo up there, and these are the angular parts which create other vents on the front panel. The front I/O consists of 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports, a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 x 2 Type C port, 2 3.5mm audio jacks for microphone and audio out, an LED switch button, reset button and a power button. So the case comes with some fans pre-installed. There's 320mm ARGB MSI fans at the front of the case. They have quite a wide gap between the blades, so they look like airflow fans rather than static pressure fans, ideal for case fans. And then there's another 120mm fan pre-installed at the rear. They're all matching fans, so the RGB lighting effects should synchronize really well with each other. In terms of cooling support, so at the front you can install up to 320 or 340mm fans or up to a 360mm radiator, so that obviously also includes a 280, a 240, 120 radiators. In the top you can install 320mm fans or just 2 140s. Again, up to 360mm radiator support in the top of the case. So again, it also supports 280s, 240s, 120s. You can see at the top of the case, it is a large vented mesh section, and you can see the radiator spacing is spaced so you can actually position the radiator in 2 positions. So if you've got a 360 or a 240, it can be screwed into either of these top brackets, which is good because if you have a motherboard with tall VRM heatsinks, you're able to move the radiator forwards to avoid any possible conflict with the VRM heatsinks. In the rear of the case, you can install either a 120 or a 140 fan. Potentially you could install a 120mm radiator in there too. There's also mounts on top of the power supply shroud because that's also vented, and on there is mounts for two 120mm fans. Maximum CPU cooler height in here is 175mm tall, so that covers most of the large dual tower air coolers. They should be able to fit inside this case without any real problems. Motherboard support is up to eATX form factor, up to 280 by 305mm. Obviously, because it supports eATX, you can also install standard ATX motherboards, micro ATX, or even ITX boards if you want to. Above the motherboard, so the gap between the motherboard and the top of the case is 80mm. So potentially, you should be able to run a radiator with push-pull fan configurations up at the top of the case. Down the side here, there's like a panel that is used for cable management. Not so much cable management, but to hide cables going through to the other compartment. There's no rubber grommets or anything there, so if for any reason you needed to remove that panel, there's nothing really to hide cable, so it's best probably to leave that in. But it can be removed quite easily. There's just a few thumb screws at the back of the case, so just remove those 3 thumb screws, and then that just pops out. It's actually on some kind of push pin quick release fittings, so potentially you don't even really need those screws in place. I guess you could just pop it in place and let it hold in by the quick release fittings, but I suppose the screws do add some security to it and it won't fall out with the screws in. You'll also notice one of the accessories that comes with the case, it comes actually pre-installed to the case, is this Omni directional graphics card stand. So it's just a fancy graphics card anti-sag bracket, but it can be adjusted. So remove the thumb screw at the front here. You can move it backwards and forwards. It's on like a ratcheting system, so you can feel some quite satisfying clicks as it moves position. These arms can be moved. The whole thing can be rotated around, and also if you just pull this little clip off there, undo the screw that's in the front, it can be then moved to several different positions. So it depends how long the graphics card is, depends where you put it in these different positions, but it should be able to work with almost any graphics card of any size, or any graphics card installed either horizontally or vertically. There is a vertical mount panel that comes with the case. We'll look at that in a moment. So that's quite a nice feature to the case. You can see it also includes some ARGB lighting, and that all connects up as well as the fans to a hub around the other side of the case. We'll take a look at that in a moment. There's also some cutouts on top of the power supply shroud. So at the front here, there's a cutout for the PCIe cables or the 12-volt high power cables. A couple more cutouts further back, and then 3 at the top, 1 at the front for the front I/O to pass through. None of them include rubber grommets, which is a bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen those on a case in this price range. Maximum graphics card length is up to 360mm. So as I say, depending on how long the graphics card is, it'll depend on where you position the stand in the case. As I say, this rear PCIe panel is removable with just a couple of thumb screws, and then it just pops out. Again, it's on quick release fittings. Potentially you don't need to tighten those thumb screws up. On the horizontal mount, there's 7 PCIe slots, but on this vertical panel, there's just 4. But that just pops in place and snaps into position, and then you just tighten up a couple of thumb screws, and then you have the potential for vertically mounting the GPU, but it doesn't come with a riser cable, so you will have to provide your own riser cable if you want to use the vertical mounting option. At the back of the case is a pretty standard ATX layout, because it is a standard ATX style case. It's not dual chamber. At the top there's a 120 or 140mm fan mount. That's the rear I/O cutout for the rear I/O of the motherboard. 7 PCIe slots in the horizontal panel. The vertical has 4 slots. Then at the bottom is an ATX power supply mount. Then around the right hand side you've got several options for storage. So there's 2 2.5-inch SSD mounts here. These are on removable brackets. You can potentially take these off and mount them on top of the power supply shroud. You don't see people doing that so often these days. SSD drives are not that interesting to look at. You've got another 2 additional 2.5-inch SSD mounts on here again on the removable trays. And then at the bottom of the case, you've got a hard drive caddy that supports either two 3.5 or two 2.5-inch drives. And they're just a kind of a quick release drawer that you pull out. Hard drive just clips in there, no screws really needed. And then they just slide back into position. This hard drive rack is adjustable. So there's a thumb screw underneath the power supply shroud. Just loosen off that, and then that can be moved into several different positions. So either you can move it towards the back of the case to make more space for front radiator and fan installation, or you can move it towards the front to allow more space for a bigger power supply and cable management. The maximum recommended power supply size is ATX up to 220 millimeters long. Potentially you can also completely remove that drive cage. There's some screws at the bottom of the case that removes this bar in front, and then that just pulls out. Cable management looks pretty decent. There's no grommets over the cutouts, which is a bit of a shame, like I mentioned, but there is this kind of central channel. It's like a plastic channel that houses these Velcro straps. There's 3 straps down there, and then a couple more additional straps at the back of the case. Another one here, so you should be able to make a reasonably good job of cable management using the straps provided that come pre-installed in the case. Also, another thing that's nice to see is all the cables are white. To match the white case, if you buy the black case, all the cables are black. Up here you have the ARGB controller. It's an ARGB and fan controller. There's 6 ARGB connections and 6 fan connections. It's powered by a standard SATA connection connected to the power supply, and you can connect the controller to your motherboard and control lighting either by the motherboard or by an LED button on the top of the case. Just spin the case around so you can get a closer look at the front. There are 3 ARGB fans pre-installed. Potentially you could remove them and place them somewhere else in the case if you wanted to fit a radiator or an AIO at the front. You can see at the top here there's a couple of thumb screws, so you just loosen those off, the captive thumb screws, and then slide that bracket upwards and it will all come out. Potentially then you can remove the bracket with the fans and work on it on the bench. So that's another nice feature to see. I would have liked to have seen a top removable bracket too, because I know this case has quite a lot of space between the motherboard and the top of the case, but if you want to run push-pull fans, it would be a bit easier if that was removable to work on it on the bench and then put it in place. Potentially as well, it's good to have a removable top panel in case in the future you need to replace the motherboard. You can just usually unscrew that and lift it slightly out of the way. It just allows more access to the top of the case. Flip the case over and you can see on the floor, it's quite a solid floor. There's not a lot of ventilation on the actual floor of the case, but there is a vent at the rear for the power supply. It's covered by a dust filter that just slides out. It's a nylon dust filter on a plastic frame, one of the better types of dust filters. Then you can see there's a large vent there for the power supply fan. These screws here and here, remove those, the bar comes out. You should be able to then completely remove the storage drive caddy. You can also see there's 4 plastic feet on the bottom of the case. They have some anti-vibration rubber pads on there. They're probably about 25 to 30 millimeters tall, so that should give plenty of ground clearance for airflow into the power supply. There's a bag full of screws and an angled screwdriver that comes included with the case. The only other real accessory that comes with it is this little bracket here. This mounts onto this cable cover, and you can potentially then mount a 80 or 120 millimeter fan on there. I guess that's to blow some air onto the graphics card. I'm not sure it makes much difference having that fan in there, but we could probably test that out later. And also this cable management panel that I showed you earlier, this actually has a couple of different positions that it can be located in. So potentially if you install a wide eATX motherboard, you might want to move it back to the furthest forward position. Like all of my case reviews, I'll be building a system inside the case to see how the build process is and test thermal performance. For that system, I'm using an Intel Core i7-14700K CPU. Motherboard is this MSI MPG Z790 Edge TI Max Wi-Fi. Graphics card is also from MSI. It's a RTX 4070 Ti Super Gaming X Slim White. For memory, it's a Corsair Dominator Platinum kit. It's a 48GB kit, DDR5, 7000 mega transfers per second. For storage, it's just a single M.2 SSD. It's the Corsair MP700 1TB PCIe Gen 5 NVMe M.2 SSD. Powering the system is the MSI MEG AI 1300P. It's an ATX3 ready power supply and it's 80 plus platinum certified. Probably a little overkill for the system. And then cooling the CPU is the MSI MEG Core Liquid E360 360mm AIO CPU cooler, 360mm radiator. Again, it's in white to match the aesthetics of the system.
If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk.
So test system's built, it's up and running, everything's working as it should be. There's some good and bad points that I want to go over, I'll talk about that shortly, but first let's look at the thermal performance of the case. I've run the usual thermal performance test. It's a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway stress test run simultaneously for 30 minutes. If you want to check out the full testing methodology, head over to kitguru.net and there is a written page over there that explains all the case testing methodology. Changing the configuration of the case and the GPU orientation had little effect on thermals. Removing the side panel and top dust filter dropped the CPU temperature by about 3 degrees C, but GPU temperature remained constant at around 43 degrees C throughout testing. There's no change in component temperature when removing the front panel, which means the panel offers little airflow restriction. Changing the GPU to vertical mounting did not affect thermals, as this 3-slot GPU can be mounted well away from the glass side panel, and adding 2 fans to the top of the power supply shroud as intakes did not affect GPU temperature either, since at least one of the fans is completely blocked by the power supply. Like the thermal performance, noise levels with the case in either configuration do not change much either. Since neither the CPU or GPU temperature is affected by changing the configuration, the fan speed remains consistent, so noise levels are almost equal apart from when we remove the front panel. So thermal performance looks okay. Those figures are what we'd expect from this CPU and GPU configuration in a decent airflow case. As I said, there's some good and bad points I want to talk about. So the installation process as a whole is quite simple. It's a regular layout, and anybody that's installed in an ATX case will find this easy to use. Cable management is good. The cutouts and the cable routing channel on the other side, all where you'd expect everything to be, and everything works well. For cable management, I didn't have to use any additional zip ties. All the Velcro straps included and fitted to the case were enough for cable management in this system. Build quality of the case is good. It's very rigid. All the screw points for the motherboard, PCIe slots and things like that all line up perfectly, and all the modular panels fit together really well, and when you take them apart and put them back in place, they all have a satisfying click when they're in the correct position. So build quality is good, thermals are good, and the installation process is good too. The GPU stand, I found that easy to use, whether the GPU was in a horizontal or vertical position. Really easy just to adjust it to the correct length and height, and it does a good job of supporting the graphics card, and it looks good with those ARGB lighting features all synchronized with the case fans. So onto the bad points. Not really bad points, they're just minor negatives that I have with the case and things that I think should be included at the price that this is. There's no back connect motherboard support, so no support for MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF, etc. You'd expect, with this being an MSI case, and MSI are making the back connect or reverse connector motherboards, you'd expect all their cases to support that feature, but this one doesn't. There's no removable top radiator or fan bracket. I know there's plenty of space at the top of the case, and it is quite easy to connect up to the headers, so the EPS and fan connectors at the top of the motherboard with the AIO there. But if you were running push-pull fans, it would be a little more awkward, and still it's good to have that removable. If for any reason down the line you do need to access the top of the motherboard and you're running a thick radiator or push-pull fans, it is useful to have that removable top bracket. You can just lift it up a little and get in where you wouldn't be able to with a fixed top like this. And at this price point, around £150, £160, I'd expect that to be a feature. During thermal testing, I found that one of the mounting points on top of the power supply shroud for a 120mm fan, it's completely blocked off. The airflow is completely blocked off by power supply, so that seems like a pointless thing. Trying to run fans in there doesn't give you any benefit, so there's really no point of that being a feature of the case. Also, this weird bracket that should be screwed to the cable management panel, and you can attach a fan to it. Again, I didn't find that useful at all. I couldn't even test that because even this relatively small graphics card, this 4070 Ti Super, it's too long to be able to use that, so not really sure what that's designed for. Maybe it's there to offer additional airflow across the motherboard if you're not using a dedicated GPU, but it seems like a bit of a wasted feature that. There's also no grommets on the cable cutouts. Again, at this price point, I would like to see those kind of features. They do neaten things up. It stops you being able to see through them and see the untidy cables. It just looks better with grommets in place. And to me, it does seem a little expensive at £150 to £160. Yes, it does include all those fans, the fan hub, and the graphics card stand. It does work well in terms of airflow and thermal performance, but it is just a regular style ATX case. There's nothing really new or innovative to it. There are those modular panels, which probably add a bit of expense, but you can get similar style cases with the same amount of fans and these features from companies like Montech and Deepcool, and they are significantly cheaper than this. But it's a decent looking case. Build quality is good. I like the fact that everything is matching in the white, the fans, the cables, good thermal performance. So it's not a bad case if you're looking for a regular ATX style case. It's just a little on the expensive side. So that's the MSI MPG Gungnir 300R Airflow. Let me know what you think of this case in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. And if you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to the store and pick up some merch. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to our website.